they straight away, that was to me, oh, okay, that's what this show's going to be about. As soon as you see that
Mhm.
and notice that, and there it's quite hard for me to put myself in the shoes of someone who didn't see all those things all the way through. But what I think was really important is, you were saying about it being in the past. I had a discussion with a friend about this episode, and I think they were talking about, oh, they were all so like, why were they all so young? It must have been about Gen Z. That's why they were all so young. And I was thinking, well, I think it's quite important that they were all so young, because it just for me rammed home the point that it's not a bunch of old people with backwards views. It's actually young people today. Um, and one of the most insidious ways in which racism continues is through these tiny microaggressions. So I thought it was quite important to the episode that they were young for that reason.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the two things. Either it's all in the past, so they go back to a time where it's in the past. I think under the previous showrunner, they had an episode that said called Rosa in 1955. So it's
Yes.
clear it's segregation, and these are bad people being racist. Someone's using a term, so it's going to call, it's things that are very, in a way, obviously, can be removed from what people of color more likely experience right now, and things that are less open for debate. And here, what I find is sort of the ability to have the debate and the sort of, again, to have the darker point of, yes, young people who I find also there's sometimes a classist bent to how racism is depicted.
Oh yeah.
So it's not the ignorant people, with a background. I'm from the South, so with a Southern accent, it's well-off people. And so much, of course, what I really appreciate what with Russell T Davies did there was, I felt, create a sort of art form where, again, how Black people and uh, you know white people are responding to it can be different, and it causes like
Mm.
to rewatch and to challenge yourself and your own biases. So again, the idea of like it's a choice. So the idea of everyone's all white, and and people say, well, maybe it's like space Seattle. Seattle seems to be very white. Portland's very white. Well, that doesn't mean you're racist. It's like, okay, where there's a choice and a history to how areas, especially in America, become
Yeah.
predominantly white. Like Oregon used to have no Black people in the dome. It literally
Yeah.
had like no Black people were allowed in these areas. So when you are in all white spaces, that is the result of a choice. That could be a passive choice. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that those folks are virulent white supremacists, just maybe passive beneficiaries of white supremacist system.
Mm.
But and then the argument that, oh, I just assumed they were very wealthy because he talks about being wealthy. But then again, you're feeding into, well, if a culture where only white people are the richest and the wealthiest, that is also a choice. That is usually a product of a white supremacist system who, again, is
Yeah.
providing, especially when they're being presented as useless, who's providing their food, who's helping them. It's very much a clear, implication. And the people who seem to think that they they're xenophobic, and I define xenophobia as being like, we've never seen a Black person before. But this wasn't like, oh, you have different skin color, I want to touch your hair
Yeah.
type. It's very clearly she's not shocked to see a Black face. She is offended. This is clearly Black people do exist. So it's sort of like
Yeah.
did the slugs actually come in and wipe out the Confederacy? It's like they're actually helping, because where are Black people in this society? They do exist because these people, their racism is clearly seen as it exists a reaction to the existence of Black people. It's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, the way that she spoke to him throughout the episode was made it so clear. I mean, it was the actress, I thought, did it really well. Her face would screw up when she was speaking to him. All of
Mhm.
her sentences were as dismissive as they could be. It was the sort of expression of disgust that she had a lot of times. But there were so many clues. Like when I was watching it back, the colours, they're blue and yellow. It's like all the way through. It's the Aryan colours in all their clothes, the backgrounds, everything. And I think it's interesting reading what some people were saying, sort of excusing why they didn't pick up on the cues. They were saying, "Oh well, you know, I thought it could have been just this, or I thought it could have been just that." And
Mhm.
those are exactly the things that go through your mind when you're trying to decide if something, is a racial microaggression.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and I think it's so ironic that 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 episode forced you to go through those steps, and yet people are doing those things to say no, the episode wasn't even about this subject
No,
because
it
it
came out
really
of
walks you
nowhere.
through it. Yeah.
Well,
um
you're trying to justify it to yourself, and I think that's
yeah,
what resonates to Black people like ourselves who
yeah,
have been in workplace, who have endured, who have dealt with Lindy's, let us say, and who, you know, it's one thing if someone's calling you a racial slur and you escalate that to an HR. It's never that simple, right? Because then it's like,
no,
oh well, we have a zero tolerance about being called, the N word at work. Like it's not that. It's just like, okay, well, this person I'm trying to give direction to, especially if you are a supervisor, and I'm trying to give direction to this person. It's not working. This client or this coworker is terrible. Almost always it can be turned on to you. And so then it'll be like your Ruby like coworker is sort of, well, Ruby seems to have no problem with her. Let's promote Ruby because she seems to do such a
yeah,
great job of managing people like Lindy. It's like, well, there's a reason. And it was interesting to see people justify the initial block of the doctor, and in itself turn it around. Oh, he came in and he was aggressive and angry. Like I saw that, and it's like, oh my goodness, because that wasn't like Gatwa very much played it as like he comes in, he's calm, because Black people know this, right? Like we come in, we're gonna be very calm, we are going to, like, he introduces himself. I know you don't know me. So once again, acknowledging that I don't, but and then giving the warning. And to see a lot of people's like, oh well, he came in and he was like shouty and ragey, almost comparing him to a previous doctor, Peter Capaldi, who would have been outright rude. He would have been, hey, you pudding brain, turn off
yeah.
the bubble and listen to me. Like he was someone who had problems, but that's never been Godway. He's a very charming, he was calm and whatever. There was no excuse really for her response. And to say that Ruby was more diplomatic, I mean, I think if someone comes in and kind of very calmly says my life is in danger, I'm more inclined to listen. If I'm on deadline and someone calls in and it's like, hey, would you like to take a survey, which is what Ruby did, I'm going to hang up because I don't have time for a telemarketer.